Hello. Here we are on the front porch of my old home by the intersection of Route 114 and Arcona Road. It is a beautiful spring day, April 28, 1995. I'm Paul Miller, and my cohort helping me with the video is my son, John Miller. Greetings to my family, my relatives, my neighbors, my friends, and whomever may eventually view this video. There's a lot of history in the local area, and my aim is to try and get that history recorded. The area is East Lisburn Road, also known as Route 114, Arcona Road, and McCormick Road along the Yellow Breeches Creek. I had the pleasure of working for the McCormick estate during my young years, working between school terms, working on weekends, and also during the evenings. My dad worked for the McCormicks all his life. During my working days, there was a young girl growing up in the area that lived in one of the homes during the summertime and fall, and attended school here across the intersection at Glen Allen School. Her name was Mary Jane Webb, now Mrs. Mary Jane Cooper. She was interested in the entire area, would be out watching the workers, seeing what they were doing and trying to understand what all was going on around the estate. I didn't see her for many years during my military and career days, but back in the mid-80s she came to visit us. We talked over a lot of history. Before she left, she thought I should get a lot of the history recorded for posterity. I chuckled a little, gave it some thought, but didn't take it real serious until a year later she approached me again. This time I took it more seriously, and I did start collecting pictures, articles, started putting it in an album, and to my surprise, the album has grown to an extensive collection. It contains photographs, articles, information on activities, in general, a complete coverage of the area I just described. It gave me an inspiration to do the job, but I have received further inspiration from another individual. This is Ralph Bailey, also along Route 114. After he saw the album, he thought it should be further recorded by doing it on video. This is the aim that we are endeavoring to obtain at the present time. Probably the first subject will be the schoolhouse. We will stop there and describe the schoolhouse a bit. It is the Glen Allen School, the one I just recently mentioned, across the intersection from my home here at East Lisburn and Arcona. If there's any time left, near the end of the video, I may describe my home a little bit. There's a reason for doing that. I am third generation here on the corner. And for that reason, I guess, I am rather considered to be the native historian of the local area. We'll get back to that at that time. Until then, we will proceed with the tour around the area. Here stands the Glen Allen School. The Glen Allen School was constructed in 1855, according to Plate 14 of Special Structures from the library. The school was in operation till about 1950. In 1953, a lady bought it and remodeled the schoolhouse, made it into a dwelling. A real nice job was done on the remodeling. The front door was replaced from the center to the left front. I'll point it out to you as we move closer into the schoolhouse and show you the special features that she maintained in the original structure. To the right of the schoolhouse is the first big oak tree. It was in some of the pictures from back in the 1800s and after that, around the turn of the century. It is still the same oak tree that are on those pictures. If possible, we'll tune in on some of the photographs, which I have had redone and enlarged. The lady maintained as much of the original structure as possible. Still has the same windows on the sides and the same shutters as was originally installed. The front porch has been redone. It was an old wooden front porch with some railings on the one end, and that was to keep children from falling off the end of the porch. Since then, it was graded to where the ground is relative level in front of the schoolhouse. We'll walk on in toward the schoolhouse now. You ready? The lady maintained some of the original blackboard and wrote one of John Greenleaf Whittier's school day poems on there. The door sill, if you'll notice, it is the original sandstone, worn down by footprints through all the years, and the door is shaped to fit the stone. The school bell has been removed. It had a school bell which with a rope down to beside the front door, which would call an end to recess or the start of school. The window to the right on the porch was newly added. Also on the rear was changed, we'll walk around to the rear side of the school and show you the additions that were put in there, okay? Now we are back at the rear of the schoolhouse. You can see that the rear door was added, the rear window, the steps, and a carport, which makes it convenient for rear entrance. There's also part of a basement under it, and a door has been added for entrance to that. Okay. We are now inside the schoolhouse. Give you a view of the original windows. The ceiling was real high, and it was lowered to the top of the windows. The petitions, of course, divided off the one-room schoolhouse to 2 bedrooms, a bathroom, and the kitchen. I went to school here. My dad went to school here. If the picture will show the photographs on the wall here, it will give you a little idea of the size of the classes. Don't know if they will show up in this amount of light very well or not. The large one here on the left was taken in 1907, and to the right is the tree that I mentioned outdoors is still there. These photographs were in our possession because of family members being on them. My father is on the large photo on the left. I am on the photo on the right in 1928. Some of my relatives are also on there, as well as my father's sister and brother on the large one. Can you think of anything else you'd like to add? Before leaving the schoolhouse area, I might add a little more history in regards to why it was constructed in this area. The Lance family donated the ground for the schoolhouse, and the deed was poorly recorded when the lady bought the schoolhouse from the county in 1953. Part of it sat on property that my dad owned at the time. In order to get a clear title, my dad signed a deed of release for enough ground to get a clear title, as well as to have room for the driveway in the rear and the carport that was constructed in that area. The Lance family was the big property owner in the area at that time. We are going to go from here to the little cemetery across the road, across the other side of Arcona Road, and give you a little view of that, tell you a little bit about it. So that's how the Lance family has entered into the picture of the property as well as the schoolhouse in the area of Route 114 and Arcona Road. We are now standing on Arkona Road, a general view from the schoolhouse around by the woods area, and on across Arkona Road to where the cemetery is located. It's an old family type cemetery. It was known as the Lance Cemetery, where some of the Lance family is buried. The large monument that you see, excuse me, the large monument you see is that of Levi Lance, the last owner of the Lance property in the area. He was born in 1834. He died in 1891. His wife Margaret is also buried there. She passed away in 1903. And according to my father's recollection, she was the last one buried in the cemetery. He could remember of that service. The cemetery has grown up with weeds and grass sometimes through the years, also shrubs and trees. A Boy Scout troop from Grantham cleaned the cemetery back in the 70s. It was a nice gesture on their part. After that, we neighbors have been keeping it clean several times of the year. It is especially kept clean for the holidays. Memorial Day, if you make a step forward, you can see a flag that is placed on a Civil War veteran's grave toward the center of the cemetery. It's blowing in the breeze there now. We'll walk down a little closer to it. We are now closer to the cemetery, and I want to point out the stone wall. It was falling out back in the 20s, and Mr. McCormick, which I will cover more in detail later, but Mr. McCormick did not like the appearance of this wall falling out. He had his own mason come down here and worked for days repairing the wall. It has stayed real well from that point on, except for a few top flat stones that have come loose from time to time. The cemetery was completely surrounded by the iron fence. To the outside of the old cemetery is a newer cemetery, that of the synagogue over on Allendale Road. They have nothing to do, however, with the old cemetery. That just about covers the cemetery. Now, from this point, I want to explain the road on which we are standing. Arkona is a recent name for the road. It's a beautiful name. Whoever thought of Arkona came up with a good idea. The McCormick estate was called Kona. It was a name, I understand, came from Nova Scotia, where they had vacation homes. And by taking the AR off of arrival and putting it on Arkona, it makes a real nice name. The road was hard surfaced, in other words paved with stone and oil and rolled long before Route 114 was ever paved. The McCormicks did that along all their property. They had their own roller, and they saw to it that this road, what is now Arkona Road, from Route 114 to what is now McCormick Road, was paved. Also, what is now McCormick Road along the creek was paved from Ford Farm Road down to and across the bridge into York County, across the meadow, and all the way up through the mountain to where their home was in the center of the mountain. This was done at least 15 years, maybe even closer 20, before Route 114 was paved. They, as I say, they had their own roller, and my dad operated the roller through 1915, 16, and on through the rest of the teens and through the 20s. The roller was rented out to the Township for some work on their highways in the Bowmansdale area, when they started constructing hard-surfaced roads in that area, especially what is now South Market Street and down the large hill in Bowmansdale. The roller was stored, I can point out later, at the Green Tree place, where there was a roller shed built for it to be parked. The word pike is used for a good many things, anything from the name of a fish to a pointed object on the end of a dart or weapon. It is also used in the name for a road, turnpike. So guess what the name of this road was back in the 20s and 30s? It was called the Pike. Anytime we were going toward the creek, we were going down the pike. Along the side of the road are lilies, tiger lilies. They started growing here because of seeds from decorations that were put in the cemetery. There are some other plants and vines in the area that aren't native to here. They started growing because of seeds being scattered out of decorations from the cemetery. The tiger lilies become real beautiful when they start to bloom. I trim along them, mow in the front and trim the brush to the rear side in memory of my wife. Back in the mid-70s, the township would mow the lilies down when they mowed along the road. My wife requested that they not mow until after the tiger lilies have bloomed. The township has honored that request ever since. They have always waited until after blooming before they are now cut down. For anyone interested in seeing a beautiful spot of tiger lilies, this is the place to come when they are in bloom. So much for the history of the Pike and Arkona Road. Here we are down at the bridge that crosses from Cumberland County into York County by the Glen Allen Mill. Before explaining the history in the area, We're getting a picture of, out of my album, of the dam in the center, the mill on the right side, and the powerhouse on the left side. If you'll notice, I took the picture back in the 30s, the first day of trout season, when the fishermen were out on the dam for trout, and snow was still covering a lot of the ground at that time. The dam was a wood constructed dam, huge timbers like railroad ties across the front of it, huge planks sloped down into the deep water behind, and they were held down by heavy rock. It was fun as youngsters to swim down there by the dam, climb up the timbers on the front and sit on top of the dam. Behind the dam, it was deep enough for swimming and diving. The dam, of course, deteriorated from the wood structure and has long since gone. The mill is still standing and being maintained by the people who now own the mill. They're doing a real good job at maintaining it. The forebay was taken away on the west side, and the bank was filled with large rock to keep the base of the mill from deteriorating. As we would cross the dam, you can see the structure, the concrete structure of what was the powerhouse, which was the center of the entire operation for the McCormick estate. I want to cover it more in detail in the next few minutes, but for the moment I want to put the pictures away, and then we can go back to explaining it further. Again, we are on the bridge that crosses between Cumberland and York County. The concrete bridge was constructed in 1918 in a coordinated effort between York and Cumberland County, and thus was the end of the old covered bridge, which was what most of the bridges were at that time. Another general view as he moves the camera from right to left. As he may come back and stop at the mill again, just pointing out the difference in the construction of the mill in the left corner. The old mill at one time had lost that corner, and it was reconstructed, and weatherboarding was put on it instead of being built up with brick. Thus the reason for the difference in appearance at that point. Mills were plentiful along streams. Every few miles had a mill. But powerhouses were real unique. And as he brings the camera around to the foundation of the what is left of the old power plant, I had the privilege of helping to operate that. It did a number of things. It gave power for the operation of both sawmills, the lumber cutting sawmill and the fireplace and stove wood cutting. It also pumped water to the water tanks for the home in the mountain when they were located there in the summer, and it also developed electricity for the McCormick estate. It was the center of the whole operation. Without it, the McCormick estate would not have been nearly as self-efficient as it was. They had electric power through that powerhouse long before PP&L, Pennsylvania Power and Light, came to the area. In fact, probably as much as 20 years earlier. However, when PP&L got their power into the area, they were glad to receive it, because the electric power from the powerhouse was a crude way of getting electric power. It took a lot of machinery, a lot of oil and grease. It was full of oil and grease fittings. One had to be careful when stepping in on the floor of the powerhouse because of grease and oil that was spread around on the floor from all the operating equipment. But it served its purpose, and it is an indication of how self-efficient an estate can be with their own water supply. As he swings the camera back again, the house beyond the mill was the chauffeur's home during the McCormick estate, and the house across the road was the mill house at that time. It isn't visible at the moment. This was a beautiful spot in those days. Due to the mill and the powerhouse, it brought a lot of history into the area. The saws were of the best material. They made music all through the glen here when they were in operation, and could be heard for miles around. Echoed off the mountain and sounded beautifully off to the north. It was a very active spot. I don't know how well the photograph will show on the video, but this was one of the special activities in the area, the hauling of creek gravel out of the stream. The gravel was used for concreting. If we got enough sand with the gravel, we didn't even have to add that. All we needed to do was add cement. Also, the gravel was screened for a certain size to use in front of the home in the mountain. The gravel was hauled out by mule team. It was heavy, and the mules really showed their muscles when they pulled the load up out of the stream, and the load couldn't be very large. Now, while we're in this location, lots of people are interested in high water marks. 1975, when Eloise hurricane came through, is the highest I ever saw the Yellow Breeches. To give you an idea, here are a couple photographs at that time. The water's up to partway up the wall at the end of the bridge and almost over the floor of the bridge. You can see what little floor is left of the bridge. That is by far the highest I had ever seen the creek, even higher than when Agnes came through with the record height of flooding at Harrisburg of the Susquehanna. This is another outside angle of the mill. As you can see, it was 5 floors plus the basement. With the basement, it was 5 stories. Everything operated by water power. They had their lift to raise bags of feed to any of the 4 floors. Down to the left here, there's a door in the lower left-hand corner to enter the mill in the basement. It also was an exit and entrance to the dry house. There was a dry house here on the corner for drying corn. You can see the outline of it on the brick where it fitted up against the base of the mill. There was a study fire kept in the bottom of that with a hot steel plate supplying the heat to dry out the corn to the proper intensity for grinding, for cornmeal that was sold to the stores in the area. That was during the last operation days of the mill. The mill operated until into the mid-50s. My father was the last one to operate the mill. I have some pictures I'll try and show you of that, and we'll step inside to show the interior of the mill to some degree. Oh, the home. A few shots inside the mill. This was the office and where they had the stove to keep warm. The original stove is still there. I don't know that it's the original from the history, but at least it was the one that was in there in the 20s and 30s. They also did their saw sharpening and their axe grinding in the warm of the office. Otherwise, this is the last millstone that was in operation. This was the hopper from the first floor where the corn was poured to work down through the millstone and into the basement where the cornmeal was sacked from the bins. The mill had 4 millstones. It was a fully operating mill at one time. Now we're in the basement where the chute delivered the ground cornmeal into the shaker, which the shaker shook the shaft, so to speak, out of the cornmeal, and the plain, finely ground cornmeal went down through the screen into the bin from where it was sacked. I don't know how well this will show in the darkness, but my son thought it was worth a try to get a picture of the gearing mechanism that goes up through the mill. We're standing where the water wheels were at one time, the horizontal water wheels, and this shows the gearing as best as possible that went on up through. Did the turning of all the machinery. This is another general scenery of the mill from the opposite side. Note the Glen Allen Mill sign by the door. It is known as the Glen Allen Mill today. The corner that fell out shows the different construction there, which I explained from over on the bridge. As the camera comes on around over the creek, the next home here is what was at that time the chauffeur's home. A real nice home where they kept the limousines at the time. Then on around to what was the mill house for the operation of the mill. The man that operated the mill back in the 20s and 30s lived there. Along McCormick Road, just west of the mill area that we left, is the one of the large farms of the Lances and later on the McCormicks. This was the large farm and had the real nice large barn. It's probably the most beautiful barn in this area of the country. It's large and well constructed. Even has a drive in the west end of it. And then the McCormicks built the farmhouse to it, off to the east of the barn. Prior to that, the home to the barn was the Lance home, which is here to the right as he comes around to it now.
That's where Mr. McCormick lived also, right?
Okay, that's correct. And after Mr. McCormick passed away, and the second Mrs. McCormick started selling off the property, she used this homestead as her home. We're still on McCormick Road in what was the McCormick estate. The house to the left was the caretaker's home. As he brings the camera around toward the medium-sized farm that was with the McCormick estate. The first building here was the wagon shed. Back behind, you can see a part of what was the ice house, where they kept their ice stored in the summer and would be delivered to the various homes in the estate every day, to the ice boxes of those days. And then a nice smaller barn, and around to near the road is the home to this farm. I might add that behind the barn was their huge truck patch for those days. They had it irrigated and grew real good vegetables and flowers, which were also delivered to the home up in the mountain nearly every day. A lot of activity in those days all over. We are farther west along McCormick Road, still along the Yellow Breeches, and the water from the dam would back up beyond this point. Off to the left, almost straight ahead there, you can still see the foundation of the boathouse. And that was, the water level was up so boats could go in and out from the boathouse. Rowboats and canoes, no motorboats. And then now just a general swing to the upstream of the general area with the little meadow here, and right directly in front of us was a swinging bridge at one time, a bridge in which we could walk across from the meadow over to get to the boathouse. That just about concludes the interesting points. At this point, we'll move on farther west to where they had a pontoon boat. Still on McCormick Road, this was another McCormick home. It was used for a summer home through the 20s and 30s, and it was known as Green Trees. An important feature here is the fact that the steamroller was kept in the garage right back at the end of the driveway, and the little barn was used for storage. They stored their tents and picnic tables, various equipment in the little barn. Now we'll move on west to the last McCormick interesting point, and that will be of the pontoon bridge. Just west of where we were, there's still another interesting residence. The little farm you see ahead is the small McCormick farm. Had a small barn, small house. It was the first property to be sold off the McCormick estate many years ago. And now as he swings around toward the creek again, I'll explain that there was a dirt road from the house in the mountain that came off to the west side of the home and twisted down through the mountain until it came to this area right directly across from us. Along the road they had lots of rhododendron and laurel planted. You can still see some of the rhododendron leaves up along that road. It came around to the flat area here off to the left, and then directly ahead it came to the creek. And at this point they installed a pontoon bridge during their stay in the summertime for use to cross the creek at this area. The pontoons were stored in the winter in the flat area on the other bank. The interesting part of the pontoon bridge was the noise it made when a vehicle crossed. The planks would rattle. I could hear them for a mile or so around the area. The installing of the pontoon bridge was stopped after the death of Mrs. McCormick in 1930. I never got a picture of that, probably because I didn't even have a camera when the pontoon bridge was installed. However, the pontoon sat over there for many years, and I'm sorry now that I didn't get some pictures of the pontoons. They were big and they were heavy. Once in a while, a storm would break the cables and they would lose a pontoon or two. It'd float down the stream. They'd have to go with their big 2-horse wagon and haul them back when they located them. It was an interesting addition to the McCormick estate. Another view of the small farm as John turns the camera. The other homes up on the ridge are new homes, but as he brings it around, you can look back down McCormick Road from where we came. And if you remember, I spoke of the hard surface roads which McCormick's made during the teens, and the hard surface came to about our present location here at Ford Farm Road. After that, it was no longer McCormick property, and it was a dirt road from here on west in those days. This is another estate entrance, still west on McCormick Road, about to turn north toward Route 114. The people that built the home on this estate also repaired the beautiful stone bridge to their entrance. That bridge at one time was a township bridge and township road across there. It was pretty well deteriorated, and the repairing of the bridge was quite an accomplishment and makes for an interesting landmark in the area. I don't have to tell you where we are now. We see railroad tracks. This location is at the subway, which is on Route 114 going toward Bowmansdale. As he comes around with the camera, you'll see we are almost above Route 114, where McCormick Road joins 114. The purpose of stopping in this area is right down here off the railroad, among the bushes in the first flat area, was a freight station for the Reading Railroad. The freight station had a name, and it became a common name for this area and the subway. Anyone speaking of this area called it Nantilla, N-A-N-T-I-L-L-A. And some of the old maps and charts of the area will still have Nantilla showing on those maps. Okay, he's coming on around, showing the railroad tracks eastbound, northeastbound, whatever. And at this point, another interesting landmark in the area, which dates back to the turn of the century, is the reservoir at Mount Allen. I wonder how many people around the Mechanicsburg area know from where their water comes. Well, this is a reservoir that was constructed before 1900. It's large. It's 2 3/10 million cubic feet. It's 16 feet deep, and in the old days they had trouble with animals getting into it, dirt or leaves and grass, and would you believe, even swimmers. Some of the young fellows would get their swimming in the Mechanicsburg Reservoir. Since that time it has been lined, and as you can see, it is covered, so the water stays pure these days, and it comes from the Ella Breeches Creek. The pumping station is at Eberly's Mill, and it's pumped all the way up here to Mount Allen, the highest elevation that they could get for the location of the reservoir for Mechanicsburg. It supplies a large area today. The unusual thing about it is that they had enough foresight to build such a large reservoir that is still serving the area in 1995. And it's located off of Mount Allen Drive. This is our day for working on the railroad. Here we are again on the old Reading railroad tracks of years ago. Before explaining this position, I would like to go back to the reservoir and make a correction. The mowing equipment was mowing around the reservoir. I hope you could hear me at that time over the mowing equipment. But it was a good time to stop. They had the gate open and we could go up there and take our picture. I believe I quoted the capacity of the reservoir, 2.3 million cubic something. What I meant to say was 2.3 million gallons that the reservoir will hold. Now back to the railroad. This is the high point in this location. We are located just off Hertzler Road, where the underpass goes underneath the railroad. From this point back toward Grantham, it's all downgrade, as well as it is downgrade in the other direction toward Harrisburg. So what would happen in the old steam engine days with the long freight trains, they would hang up at this point, especially coming from Grantham. The downslope toward the Harrisburg area, where he's pointing the camera now, is not as great, but you can still I believe the camera will still pick up the downgrade from this point. But the trains did not hang up as often coming from the Harrisburg direction. It was from Grantham that they would hang up, and there was a standby pusher engine in the Grantham area staying there for that purpose, to help push the trains over this incline. When this took place, the lead engine would signal to the pusher engine. They would do a lot of signaling with their whistles. And it was very interesting to hear them, especially on a clear, cold night. The shrill sound of the whistle was heard all over the countryside. But they would signal back and forth until they got ready, and the pusher would start at the same time that the lead engine would start pulling, and they would get the train moving. But the other unusual thing, in order to get going, when the power was put back on, the wheels of the lead engine would spin, and it would make a terrible racket. The whole community was used to the racket that those wheels would make spinning on these steel tracks. Now, the other thing about it, no matter which way the train was headed, it would be going slow in this area or at a complete stop. In those days, hobos would hitch rides on the trains, and this was an ideal spot for them to jump on and off. And they would find locations to stay for a while in vacant spots, vacant homes, or travel the countryside asking for sandwiches and places to sleep in houses and barns. Some farmers would allow them to sleep in their barns, but warned them of no smoking any time while in their barns. End the story on the old Reading Railroad at this point. And now we are at our little model airport. It's on Hertzler Road, just off of, I'm sorry, it's on Kleindense Road, just off Hertzler Road. You can still see the railroad over there where we made our last stop. This used to be the West Shore Flyers Society. It is now the Capitol Flyers on this side, and they have another field on the other side of the river called the Harrisburg Flyers Club. Two different clubs. It is not an ancient landmark, but it's been here quite a while, from over 20 years. Over 20 years, the man says. So it's been around quite a while. They keep it mowed nice and clean. And here's one gentleman getting the airplane out now, and above is the windsock they use. When
This is called a Sports 40, the name of the plane, and the model,
it's called Sport 40?
Sports 40.
Okay.
And this is a Super Tiger engine. It's a 45.45 cubic inch.
Good.
And that's a good muffler on there. Some of them are a little bit more noisy than what this one is. This is quite very relatively quiet.
I may not be able to hear that one over at my home.
You'll hear them all.
It's quite windy today, as you can see by the windsock up here.
Yeah, when it goes out and straight out, it gets a little stronger.
It gets a little
we
stronger.
can still fly today.
They're still planning to fly.
I've maintained if you can't fly them in the wind, you can't fly. So.
Very good. Thank you much.
Okay.
The gentleman here has been very kind. He's started up his little aircraft, and here he goes. Going to take it off in this strong wind. He says if he wrecks it, it's his own fault. Now he's turning it into the wind to take off into the wind. That's the one he pointed out had a big muffler on it. It is rather quiet.
Downwind will go like hell.
Oh, some acrobatics too. Huh? Outside loop. That put a lot of blood in his head, huh?
I'll say.
In spite of the strong wind, it's a beautiful day for this. How about that? He has done this before.
Once or twice.
Once or twice, he says. Huh? Coming in for his landing in this gusty wind. He did a great job.
Yeah, hit the prop too.
Did you?
That wasn't too good at landing.
We are now along Hertzler Road in the vicinity of a real old stone house that was even nice when it was car just went by. This was a real nice stone house even as it was back in the teens and 20s, but it has been remodeled, some rooms added to it, and it's a very lovely home in a very nice location with the stream running by the front. From what I remember in the 20s and 30s, it's a far cry from those days. It was an isolated spot back here, and I told you of the hobos jumping on and off the the trains up the way. Well, this house was empty for a number of years, so that tells you a little story about where the hobos hung out for a short period of time until the house was repurchased. Now he's going to turn the camera on around toward Hertzler Road and across to the other side where a newer home had been built in recent years, but the beauty of this is the landscaping that they have done, and the little bridge across the stream, and the limestone building in the ground here, sort of a coal cellar, which had been remodeled a bit, fixed up to where it's a lovely little spot. Just beyond the homes that we pictured is the limestone country. Real heavy limestone in this area, and years ago there were quarries. In my album I have a picture of the men quarrying stone in this area, and you will be able to see offsets in the banks where they quarried out the stone. One of them is here where he's bringing the camera around now, and in this area was a wall that's still showing here near the road where they had their scales, and a little building, little office so to speak, for selling their stone as well as lime from the lime kiln in the area. On west along this road there are other various offsets where it was easy to allow the car to go by here. Little offsets in the bank where it was easier for them to get to the limestone and quarry it out. It was difficult enough as it was, so they didn't go any deeper than they had to into the banks to get what they needed. Although this is a construction of later years, it is the pumping station for the Upper Allen Township. It was located in a low area here along the stream, which is always flowing with nice clear water. We're standing right on the little bridge right over top of it now. It comes down through the meadow from the last two homes that we visited up the area, up on Hertzler Road. Actually, here we're back on Arkona Road. On downstream from this location, not very far, was another mill. It was known as the Underwood Mill. It, of course, is gone now, but it was real active in its day. We'll walk on up grade here. Two of the original homes along Arkona in this area are being shown now. He's got the camera pointed toward a quaint old house that has a lot of history to it. Coming around on downhill of Arkona Road around to sort of a mate to that home here to our right. Those are the two original homes in this area along Arkona. We have made the circuit, so to speak, sort of around the block, covering the old homes in the area, the landmarks that are of interest. We're back to my own home, standing here in the front yard, looking toward the barn. As he comes around toward the house, as the wind starts blowing real hard, The house used to sit directly in front of the barn underneath these trees. It was moved and turned to face the intersection at the present location. This concludes the outdoor portion. We will return to where we started on the front porch to review the tour. We are back where we started on my front porch for a little review of the tour that we enjoyed doing. I mentioned the name Lance a lot, and I mentioned the name McCormick a lot. Perhaps it would be well for me to review the McCormick name a little bit for those who are not familiar with the name other than McCormick Road and McCormick Drive in the Lisburn Estates. The McCormicks were a family of three: Vance McCormick, Henry McCormick, and Miss Ann McCormick. They had their winter homes on Front Street in Harrisburg. Their summer homes were along the Yellow Breeches Creek. Vance McCormick's summer home was located at Cedar Cliff. That is where Cedar Cliffs gets its name. Henry McCormick had his summer home at Kona, the area we covered. Miss Ann McCormick had her summer home at Rose Garden. That is where Rose Garden gets its name. They also had their summer, or their so-called vacation homes in Nova Scotia. Every August they would go to Nova Scotia. They owned a lot in the area. They owned the Dauphin Deposit Trust Company. They owned the Market Street Bridge. They owned the Payne and Shoemaker building in Harrisburg, and they were involved with the steel mills and the coal mines. So they were real wealthy people, and they, as my tour indicated, they did anything they wanted to do in the way of pontoon bridge, swinging bridge, boathouse, the dam and the powerhouse. All those things were maintained by Henry McCormick. Vance McCormick was mayor of Harrisburg when the 3 miles of steps were constructed along the river. He also ran for governor of Pennsylvania, but didn't make it. The first Mrs. McCormick, Mary Boyd McCormick, died in 1930, relatively young. She was a teacher for the men's Bible class at the Pine Street Presbyterian Church. It was quite a large class. Every summer, she and her husband would hold a picnic for the Bible class in the meadow across the creek from the mill. I have one of the most recent pictures. It was 1934 when the last picnic was held, and I have a nice picture of that. I counted, I believe it was 160 some men attending that picnic. It was a big event. After she died, Mr. McCormick remained a widower all through the 30s. He remarried in the early days of World War II. While I was in the service, he passed away. Unfortunately, I didn't get some pictures that I wish I had taken back in those days. Some pictures of things I guess I thought would be there forever, but after Mr. McCormick's passing, things deteriorated pretty fast. And some of the things that would now make pictures of good history are no longer in existence. In looking over my album, I don't see much that needs to be reviewed. Anyone interested in seeing my album is certainly welcome to stop by, talk over the history, and I'll be happy to show you in detail the album. I mentioned in the start that my album has grown and continues to grow. And just this week, I got my last item, received it from a friend, that I am putting in the album. It is a public sale, dated December 14th, 1920. And here's what it says. In Upper Allen Township, at the old Underwood Mill property, 3 miles southwest of Sharmanstown, about 2 miles northwest of Lisburn, the following personal property for sale. I appreciated getting that sale bill. It will become a part of my album. My son and I have enjoyed doing the tour. We hope you will enjoy it and feel free to stop in at any time. Thank you.